Okay? I don't think you can hear me. Hi. It's turned on? Ah. Now. Perfect. Hi everyone. How are you doing? Good? Yeah, so many people. I'll just take a quick picture with you, so smile. It's great to have a big audience. Smile, everyone. Thanks. So, I'm Phillip. I'm from beautiful Vienna, city of fatty food and classical architecture, but that's not what we are talking about today. I'm working at Elastic, you know, for search, full text search, and log management and all these things, and I'm in the infrastructure team, and I'm also doing lots of conferences. So I'm happy to be here today and to talk about stuff we can do. And if I'm not working, I'm running meetups in Vienna, so one about databases and one about papers, but that's also not the topic for today. So, talking about you, any confessions from your side? What sins do you have committed? Or what sins do you want to avoid in the future? Yeah, so let's dive into that. What sin is that? Any ideas? What sin is that? Exactly, gluttony, the overindulgence and overconsumption of anything to the point of waste. Which, since we're all Java developers, we know, add all the dependencies, download the internet with Maven or Gradle or whatever, just get it all in. And yes, we're getting kind of fat and lazy and big, and you can feel it. If you pull in all the dependencies, you will use lots of function space or meta space in Java 8 and up. So if you add all the dependencies, you will feel it on the memory. And every time you want to deploy, you will also feel it, because you build a jar file or your WAR file, and every time you transmit that over the network, you will feel the pain of having too many dependencies. And you will, yeah, it will take more time, and it will slow you down, and you feel like, it's not going so well. So what you could do is put your own dependencies or your external dependencies on a diet to conquer your gluttony. For example, if you're using Amazon, I see someone with an Amazon. No, it's a Rejects shirt, unfortunately. But we have Danilo here, who is from Amazon. And if you're using Amazon, that's quite nice. But previously, the Java dependency was really big. As you can see up there, version 1.8 had 13 megabytes. And you would, as soon as you would want to interact with the Amazon stuff, you would need to pull in that full dependency, and it would add 13 megabytes to your project, wherever you want to use it, even if you would just use a single of their tools, like you would access F3, the file storage, and you would just add 13 megabytes to your dependencies, which is not so nice if you need to carry it around. And at some point, the Amazon guys said, yeah, we know this is not so nice from us, so we're putting our stuff on a diet, and they have now split up their dependencies. So you can actually use only the things you're using. So now you can just say, give me the base dependency, and then I'm just pulling in the little things I need. And this will probably use, I don't know, 1 or 2 megabytes instead of 13. So you've saved 10 megabytes to transfer over your network and memory just to load stuff up, which is nice. And if you do that more and more often, you will save lots of space and memory. On the other hand, you can obviously overdo it. Are there any Node developers here with NPM? NPM is kind of taking the opposite approach, where you just have every single method or function is its own dependency, and that's just too much. And then you have the left pad fiasco, where somebody retrieves one of their dependencies and the whole internet breaks. So you can also overdo this, but like, find meaningful packages for your dependencies just to use them, and don't overdo it in anything. And the second thing is combine all the projects. Now, at the moment, we're kind of taking the opposite approach with microservices, because like combine all the projects was the big bad monolith we had sitting somewhere, and at the moment it's more microservices. So I have the feeling that at some point microservices are not enough, and people want to get smaller and smaller and smaller things, and then you create nanoservices, Pico, Femto, Atto, up until Yocto services, because Yocto is the smallest thing I could find. So once you've reached Yocto, you cannot get any further down. And this is kind of like one function per microservice, which sounds nice in theory, because everything is nicely packaged, and you have, like, it's very easy to see and understand what each service is doing. But again, overdoing is just as much of a problem as underdoing it. Because on the left-hand side, you can see this is kind of the model you're striving for, and in theory it looks pretty nice. And on the right-hand side, you see what it actually looks like in practice. And that's probably not so nice anymore. So yes, you could kind of overdo that. And I often have the feeling like people who are really driving down the microservice path, they're ending on the right-hand side. And it's actually, reality is not so pretty after all. And then there is, I think this is the only good thing that came out of Gartner, the Gartner hype cycle, and I'm still not sure where we are with microservices at the moment. So I have the feeling we're kind of at the peak of inflated expectations, and some people will now fall down to the trough of disillusionment, and at some point we'll hopefully reach again the plateau of productivity, and we'll see. Hopefully nobody falls down too much with the microservice train. And so I would say yes, microservices, I mean, every talk now needs to mention microservices, and always like a bit cautious, like, yes, if you're a big team and you're stepping on each other's toes and you have like lots of commit conflicts and other bad problems, it will help. Yes, it helps if you have too many dependencies and you just want to split it into more manageable chunks. Yes, it helps if you want to scale stuff independently but not your entire system. So if you have specific bottlenecks and you want to scale them up, yes, splitting them up as microservices or services will help and work. But again, you're trading pain, so this is not a free-for-all. Some might remember there are these things like networks, they have like failures and add complexity. So there is these 8 fallacies of distributed systems, and also Twitter experienced that. Everybody remembers the fail whale from Twitter, which was like a few years ago. Every time Twitter failed, you would have the fail whale on the page. And they learned the hard way how to do stuff right and how to do stuff wrong. And today they're doing lots of stuff right, because you hardly see the fail whale anymore. But again, distributed systems are hard, and there is a great blog post by Jeff Hodges, Notes on Distributed Systems for Youngbloods, and there he details kind of all the little details they've learned and how to avoid the growing problems. And his main takeaway is distributed systems are different because they fail often, and you have many different parts that can fail independently, and that is what will cause problems for you. And yes, if you overdo it, stuff can go from bad to worse. Like, we replaced our big monolith with microservices, and now it's like more of a murder mystery, because you have all these little different services which are running independently, and then if stuff fails, you actually need to find out which component is it, where is my problem. In the past, if you had a network issue, you could just run tcdump on your big monolith, and you would get the full picture. But if you have microservices and your services are spread over, I don't know, 20 services and 50 servers, where do you actually start running TCP dump? So tooling gets much more complicated. It can help, but of course you're trading pain again. So, and then some people say, yeah, microservices are SOA done right. Who's done SOA? Who's been in the industry for a long time? So like if you were in computer, doing anything with computers like 10 to 15 years ago or so, SOA was all the rage, the service-oriented architecture. And yes, stuff has improved. SOA was about lots of big, bad technology, and this is W as Death Star. if you remember that. If you've ever done SOA, there was this web service, WS, as standard for everything. So you had WS security, transactions, whatever. All these things came from big vendors, didn't really work, were hugely expensive, and a major pain in the ass. So that's where WS Death Star came from. And we're kind of past that. Now with microservices, everything is REST-based, we have HTTP, and with JSON, and everything is much nicer. So we're past that. But will microservices still solve all your problems? I don't think so. Do you know what this is? Sticking to Star Wars. Any ideas? Yes. But actually what I want to say is two microservices and their shared database. So microservices are, yes, they will help you again, but if you have this big database with this monolith in the middle and you cannot easily scale and distribute that, yeah, you have starfighters which are kind of independently flying around, but without their base, the database, they're still pretty much helpless and useless. And then there are people who say, don't think about microservices, they're too complex to manage if you cannot manage a monolith. Don't do it. Start off with the monolith and then build upon that. And still pay attention to good modularity. And that's what Martin Fowler said, who is all about refactoring and stuff. And I find it interesting that still he would prefer starting off with a microservice, not with a microservice, but with a monolith in the beginning. And yeah. So this stuff gets easier. On the left-hand side, you would have your software stack like 10 years ago, which you could kind of keep in your head. And on the right-hand side, this is what you're doing now with microservices. Which one is easier? Always depends. And yes, many big systems use the right-hand approach and have lots of complexity and build lots of tools, and for some it's working. But some other big sites are still using the approach pretty much on the left-hand side. So for example, Stack Overflow is still very much on the Microsoft side of things and still using IIS and totally against microservices. And it's working great for them. Twitter, on the other hand, is now fully based on microservices and it's also working great for them. So it will always depend. But make the right decision because it's solving your problem and not just because microservices are cool today. And then there are the people who say, yeah, the problem is microservices sound so cool and we now need to make the monolith cool again as well. So we should probably call it mega platform, Uber container, or stereolith. And if we call our big monoliths like that, everybody would love to do them again. So maybe it will take 2 or 3 years, and then we'll come back with that, and then the big monolith will be all the rage again. Yes. And just to conclude, yes, simple small microservices will hopefully help with the overall complexity, but you're pushing the complexity down. So each service on their own is simple, but then the integration layer, just keeping all this, the systems up and running and having everything in the right combination and getting an entire system up and running, that's where you're moving the complexity. And it's just about trading pain. Where do I want to experience the pain? In the service itself or in the integration of the services? And everybody repeat after me. I'm not Facebook, Google, or Amazon, because that's kind of what I see often, that people think, yeah, the big guys are doing it like this, so I need to do exactly the same thing, and that's what will save me. Okay, next up, greed. Excessive or rapacious desire and pursuit of material possessions. And I have a single slide for that, and probably everybody remembers. Have you used JBoss Red Hat? Now it's Wildfly. I'm sure they will now say everything is better, but I still remember when I was doing that like 7 years ago or so, you had this big application server and it would take 5 minutes to start up. And every time you would redeploy, it would take 120 seconds. And after 5 redeploys, you would get an out of memory and then you would need to restart for 5 minutes. And, sorry? Yes. Yeah. It was always the out-of-memory permgen Yes, so I think we're kind of past that. The agreed that the application server is kind of the center of the application, and you're just like filling in the domain knowledge you have, and the application server is the base for everything, and you just have it run your stuff. I think that's kind of a thing of the past now. And just as Josh Long previously, I'm sure he said, make jar not war, so avoid the big application servers, and I'm pretty much on his side now. I don't see so much use case for many application servers. I still like to have my simple jar files and have them run and skip the added complexity of big application servers. Even though, of course, Wildfly and all the other application servers have also improved a lot over the past few years. What is that? Any ideas? What's the sin? So sloth, the physical laziness or spiritual laziness. So I guess who's doing continuous integration? Everything you push to whatever version control you're using gets automatically tested. Who's doing that? Okay, quite a lot. Okay. So this is something I think everybody should do, because that's the only way to find bugs and stuff you're breaking quickly, and it doesn't really add much overhead or cost. The next thing then is to add continuous delivery, where you automatically build everything you push, but you actually only manually deploy to production. You can automatically deploy to development, staging, whatever you call it, but to production it only goes by hand. So who's doing that? Okay, a few. And then kind of the final step would be continuous deployment, where you automatically deploy to production. Who's doing that? Okay, still a few, okay. So the overall picture is, yes, full of buzzwords. So agile, somehow you need the right approach. So you have code, and that gets built automatically. And then with continuous integration, you automatically integrate and test your stuff. With delivery, you actually have the releases and can deploy it to production. And only with continuous deployment, you actually deploy it to production. And then if you want to throw in another buzzword, you have DevOps, which is kind of the developers are just pushing the code, and if stuff breaks, they need to handle it themselves. Okay. And now many people will say continuous deployment, that's automatically deployment to production, that's the goal, and you need to do that. And I'm always like, do you really need to do that? I mean, yes, if you're Google or Facebook or whoever, it might help you, but if you're not, it's probably not helping you that much. And I'm a big Jenkins fan, and the two things I love to do with Jenkins is, first off, Jenkins can have its own problems. So there can be Jerkins, the robot is failing on purpose. It can be Jenkins, you've done something wrong and it's failing because of incompetence. And Jenkins, it fails for no discernible reason. So but that's probably the same for every build server. Two features I love. First, I can do my releases, my Maven releases with Jenkins. It's just a single click, and it will automatically turn up my snapshot to the desired release version, push my release jar file or whatever thing you build to my Nexus or wherever it goes, and then it will roll up the next snapshot version again, and it will automatically do all the commits for you, and you don't need to do anything by hand. So it's just a single click of a button, and then Jenkins will do the full deployment for you. And the other thing is it can do automatic promotions, so you can either automatically promote or you can simply click a button and then it will promote your stuff for development or production. So you're still in control, and if you don't want to go the full mile, still a human interaction is possible just to push it to the right stage where you want to go. So these things are pretty nice. One other thing I really like about the process is to separate your code and configuration. Like we've heard in the keynote, treat your configuration and automation as a first-class citizen and have that in version control as well. But I always try to keep the two separate. So once I've released an artifact, like a jar file or a WAR file, and I change something in my infrastructure or in my deployment scripts, I don't want to re-roll my jar file or WAR file because it can just stay the same if I've built it the right way. So for example, if your SSL certificate expires, I don't want to have that in my jar file. I want to have that in my configuration file. So if I want to re-roll my SSL certificates, I don't need to rebuild all my artifacts. For example, if your SSL certificate gets compromised, if you build it correctly, you don't really care. You simply get a new certificate, roll it out, but you don't need to do any rebuilds of your artifacts, which is kind of nice. Okay, coming up next, what is that? Loss. Intense and uncontrolled desire to do stuff, which is in IT always use the hottest shit, which everybody loves doing, right? And for me, like the hottest shit I'm always have the feeling people absolutely need to do is Docker. So who is using Docker? Okay, who is using Docker in production? Oh, still a few, okay. Nice. So what Docker kind of tries to fight is that it works on my machine. I'm sure everybody has this colleague who says, but it works on my machine, and at some point you just tell him, okay, I don't care, back up your email, your laptop now goes to production because this is the only place where this stuff seems to work. And yeah, you try to get rid of that. So you have Docker, so you have your Docker image, and you can run it locally, and it works, and you push the same Docker image to development, and it works, and the same thing to production, and it still works. So if your problem is that stuff changes between environments, and you have these breakages, or you have very hard dependencies around it, which you cannot easily manage, yes, then Docker will help you. But the thing with Docker is, it doesn't really give you much. I have often the feeling it's like, yes, you've containerized your stuff, but the question is, now what are we going to do? So we have our nice little containers, but where are we going next? And the problem is, containers will not fix the broken architecture. And people say, yes, you're welcome for that info. Because often Docker ends up like this. So you have your independent containers, and they're doing pretty well on their own. So each of the containers independently is actually doing great. But it's just like the whole ecosystem and the whole thing, which gets much more complicated. And if you don't have the right system, I mean, there are tools that will help you, but they still will add complexity. It's still like you will end up as the ship arena, and yes, the containers are doing great, but your whole system is not doing great. So yes, you can use Kubernetes, Mesosphere, whatever, just to manage all your containers, but it's still not a silver bullet solution. It's still like stuff can go wrong. And the other thing, again, to quote Josh Long, you're using glibc. Just a few weeks ago, there was a big security issue in glibc, and you would need to patch and update it. What are you doing with Docker now? You still need your full automation, so you still need the automated fashion just to re-roll all your containers, just to get rid of that. So Docker alone is not the solution. You will still need other tools and automation around that. And then there are now always people coming up and say, hey, there's Alpine Linux. There is no glibc. It's great. The problem is glibc is just used basically everywhere, and if I'm not mistaken, you cannot run the Oracle JDK without glibc. You can run the OpenJDK JRE without glibc, but you cannot use the JDK. And this is something we at Elastic are currently battling, because like all our stuff just assumes you're using glibc, and with all our tests have depended on it. And now we're trying to add Alpine Linux to the mix, and it's just like a new thing we need to test, and we really need to make sure it's working and iron out all the bugs. So yes, again, there are ways around, but it adds complexity, and again, it really needs to be worth it. Okay, and then there is, I don't know who's seen that, Hitler uses Docker. There's this great meme of the downfall, der Untergang auf Deutsch, in German, where he just shows all the things that can go wrong. And I'm not showing you the video, you watch it at home, it's really funny, and it touches on a lot of stuff that can go wrong. And the first thing is like everybody just, or very few people use Docker in production. So that's when he throws out most of the generals of his room and he tells them, yeah, only the people should stay who are using Docker in production, only like 3 of them are staying. And then you have like containers and virtual machines and you just stack them up upon each other and it's probably not helping your end goal. So yes, you can do it, but it's probably not really solving your problems. And my main problem with it is like, both with microservices and with containers, it feels like a cargo cult. Cargo cult is like, the successful guys are doing it, and just because the successful guys are using microservices and containers, if I use these 2 technologies, I will be successful as well. And as always, Dilbert says it best, where the boss figures out the successful companies are doing golf tournaments. So the quickest way to success for them is to do their own golf tournament, because that will solve all their technical problems and issues. And I'm not really convinced golf tournaments will save your company, but yeah, you might try. And my assumption is always make jar, not war. We can, of course, disagree on that. And based on that, I always feel like the JDK is kind of my container. So I have Amazon, and onto Amazon, I simply throw a specific JDK version, and then I have my jar file that contains all my dependencies. And I don't really need my container around that, because I try to keep as few dependencies as necessary around that. And I just have my self-contained jar file, and I have a JDK, and everything else, I don't really need to package that up into a container. Your mileage may vary, but that's my experience. Next up, pride. Believing you're essentially better than others, which is kind of, I don't need to monitor my stuff, it will just work. And 2 services that are kind of nice are, first off, New Relic. Who's using New Relic? Very few? Okay. The nice thing is with New Relic, it just monitors your server and it can monitor various programming languages. So you have an agent, for example, for Java, and that simply hooks into your application. The only thing I've seen that some versions of New Relic caused memory leaks for our applications, which was not so nice, because then we tried to debug the memory leak with New Relic, and actually New Relic was causing it. And as soon as we stopped using New Relic, everything was fine, and it was like, I'm not sure if this is really the point. But the nice thing with New Relic is they have a mid-tier, which is quite expensive, but if you're on Amazon, that tier is free to use. So you just need to write in and say, hey, I have my service on Amazon, and then you will get lots of their services for free, and I've always used their free services, and it was, yeah, free is hard to beat. And the other one is Datadog. Anybody using Datadog? Nobody heard of Datadog? Datadog is super fancy. It has like very nice dashboards, and again, you have agents you can throw into your application, and they will monitor both your Amazon infrastructure, your Java applications, whatever service you have. They have lots of integrations like into databases, web servers, Java, everything. They can monitor it, and they have a very nice overview. And they have even a very reasonable pricing. I think it's $15 per month. So in comparison to most other tools, that's pretty cheap. Okay. Yeah, every time I'm asking, well, what is that? People keep saying Kevin Spacey, and that's not what I meant. It's envy. The discontent toward someone's traits, status, abilities, or rewards. And this is kind of the craft everything yourself. I guess everybody knows their colleague who has this not invented here syndrome, where you really need to write everything yourself. I know somebody, I'm lucky I've never had to work with him, who writes everything himself. So he's called also Phillip. It's not me. And he has, like every library you could imagine, he has a Phillip something library. And he has, like, I guess everybody, or many people will know Apache Commons, and he has Phillip Commons. Because he said the Apache Commons is crap because it's slow and it's not doing what he wants, and he has a Phillip Commons. And he has, like, for everything, for serialization, for security, he has everything Phillip something. And if you ever need to work with him, you need to work with all his libraries. which is probably not really what you want. And if you touch the project once and he throws in all these dependencies and then he moves on, you're stuck with all his crap. So don't do that. Instead, actually Josh should pay me because I'm always promoting his stuff. Who knows Start Spring.io? Yes, who's using it? Yeah, a bit, okay. You simply say, okay, I want a Maven file or a Gradle file. You define what is your group name and your artifact ID, and what am I actually doing. So I'm having a web project, I'll add the web dependencies, and it will just put together a version of dependencies that are known to work well together with all the boilerplate configurations. So logging will be set up and all the things you will normally need to manually do. It will automatically do it for you. You can simply download the Gradle or Maven file, and then you can get up and running in no time. This is like the PHP community, which is always bashing like the Java world, for you saying like you need to write 1,000 lines of XML configuration before you're able to start the Java project. It's not really true anymore. It's like put in what you want to do here, download it, and you're good to go. And you can probably start that project as soon as you've downloaded all the dependencies in a few minutes. So yes, the only complaint I have about this is that it's pulling in quite a lot of dependencies, and if you really know what you're doing, you might be able to build something smaller than it, but it might not really be worth the effort. And then for not crafting everything yourself, who's familiar with the term pets versus kettle on hardware? Okay, just a few. Okay, so previously our servers were pets. We gave them a name. We raised them by hand. We kind of handcraftingly built them, and if they were sick, we tended to them to fix stuff. And yeah, we knew the names, like, I don't know, whatever you call your server, that's the name, and here's this problem, and I will fix it. And now you don't really do that anymore that much. Now you have kettle, because kettle don't have really a name, you know, and kettle are not really raised by hand, but kind of raised automatically. And if one of your kettle is ill, you simply kill it and replace it with another one, so it doesn't infest the rest of your stock. And this is kind of the approach I like much more now. I'm using Ansible for lots of stuff, and I always feel like Ansible is kind of winning because, yeah, old-timers are using Puppet and Chef still, but new people love to use Ansible, and with Ansible you can do all of this very easily. So if you're running on Amazon, like I do with lots of my stuff, Ansible can configure your instances on Amazon and your databases and whatever you have there. It can provision your instances, so it can just install updates, install a specific version of the JDK, install, I don't know, log rotate or whatever you need to have, and configure all of that the way you need. And since it's kind of just push-based SSH, it can also deploy your applications, which is nice. So you have the Ansible, a single tool just to work through the whole stack. And once you discover, hey, this server is actually not doing that well, you can simply terminate it, and with Ansible you can just recreate it and start from scratch. And you don't need to look for strange little bugs. And also over time, even if you kind of document everything you have configured on the server, at some point you won't be able to recreate the server exactly like it has been before. And if you've automated everything, you don't really care. You don't do any manual changes. It's just like if something is not working as expected, simply terminate the server and start from scratch. And you have a known good state you can also easily reproduce in other environments, which is nice. And yes, so this is like all the things I'm really positive about, like automate all the things. I'm fully for automating, which was also kind of part of the keynote. And for the operational side, I'm fully on Ansible there. Yeah, Brad Pitt, I know. What is the sin? Wrath, known as rage. Uncontrolled feelings of hatred and anger. And I always have this if stuff is going really wrong and you need to figure out what has gone wrong. So the first thing with your applications, hopefully everybody is logging their stuff somehow. But as soon as you're not having a single server, you probably want to have a centralized logging. And Yes, this is where our stuff comes in. So if you're from Elastic, if you haven't heard, there's this thing called Elastic Stack, where you can ingest your logs either with Beats, which is a very lightweight agent, and then Logsesh is kind of the more powerful cousin who can also do some enrichment for you. You store the data in Elasticsearch, and then you have Kibana, which is kind of the window into your data where you can visualize what is actually going on with your server. So this is the Elastic Stack, which is very nice just to aggregate all the logs from whatever system you have and work with that. And here you can see an example. You see, I don't know, I have 319,000 visitors, and I can see, okay, they've come from these regions, and I say, okay, they've transferred like 2 gigabytes of data, and all the stuff they can do. And you can simply aggregate that in the Elastic Stack and build nice little dashboards to keep an overview, and also to keep the business guys happy, because you just show them the nice little overview page and everybody's happy. Big win. And the other thing is, stuff will go wrong in your application. So you will have exceptions, you will have some severe error, warn, whatever messages. And one tool that is very nice is Sentry. Anybody heard of Sentry? Okay. Anybody using Sentry? Very nice. So Sentry, it's probably a little hard to reach, but Sentry actually understands, okay, this is one specific error, and if it happens again, it will just aggregate the two together, and it will keep count for you. So you know, this error has happened, for example, 8 times, and then on the left-hand side of it, you can see when it happened the last time, and you can also see it has affected like 6 users and what log level it was. And then you can even assign the error and have people work through it. So if you have a big application with lots of errors, hopefully not, Sentry is very nice, so you can just step through it, through your errors, and you have them assigned, and then people can start actually working through them. Okay, to conclude, yes, there are many sins like gluttony. Don't add all the dependencies, don't write the big bad monolith, write a new nice monolith, or build microservices if it helps you. Greed, be careful with your big application servers. They're probably not the center of the universe anymore, and often causing more problem than they're good for. Sloth, don't be lazy, have your commits automatically built at the very least, and then depending on how far you want to push it, automatically build your releases, or even automatically deploy them. Wrath was log your stuff and kind of keep track of what is going wrong. Pride is don't feel too good about your stuff, but monitor all the things, also to see like performance has gone down, and continuously improve on that. Rust was always use the hottest shit, or not always use the hottest shit, like for example Docker. Use it if it is really solving the problem you're having, and not just because all the cool companies are using it. I mean, it's nice to play with new technology and stuff, but if it's not really helping your business case, it's probably not the right solution. Right, and if you have forgotten about the movie 7, there's an 8-bit version. I think it's just a few minutes long, and it kind of shows you the gist, and it feels like the old-time video games, and it's pretty nice to get you into that feeling. And yeah, any questions or confessions, or do we still have time? I think I have still a few minutes, right? Do I? Sorry, yes?
And then you have to make a meaning out of it.
Right, so the question was, should you just log like strings out, or should you already log in a formatted fashion like JSON with some structure? So if you have a format that you can actually use, I would definitely use that, yes, if you can make use of it. But since we have the question, I can actually show you what that looks like. Since I'm from Elastic, our stuff always looks like, I'll make this a little bigger. Hope it doesn't break, okay. So this is Kibana, that's kind of the window into all your logs. So this is just like a local VM that's running, and here you can see all the the logs that have happened during this week. So I've started that server at some point. I've collected in that hour 5,000 log messages. Today I've collected some more. And you can actually see here, this is all the information I have. So I know from which server the information comes, what the message is, what the file is, where it's from, etc. So all of this information I can do with Kibana then. And for example, if I want to search for something, when did I reboot my server, I can simply search for reboot and I can see, okay, I rebooted the server today because I had to fix something, and 2 days ago, and you can simply search for your stuff.
And then we are already using Sentry, so could you contrast and compare this and Sentry? Like, when would we use it? When would you use this one, or do we use them both?
Sentry is more like for your application errors. So you have always like a log message with error 1, whatever, and you want to have that in a structured form and you want to aggregate those. The Elasticsearch is more for the overall picture and general, like, what is your operating system doing? What is your application doing? So you have like one place where you have it all, and it can actually do much more. Let me show you. We have so in this thing I've integrated some dashboards, and this is something you couldn't do with Sentry. For example, here I have of this server my system load, and I know, okay, these are the processes running, and I have my CPU usage, and I would graph out all that information. So Elasticsearch is more like, I always compare it like to IKEA, where you get the building blocks and then you need to do some assembly yourself, whereas Sentry is very much focused on one use case, which is getting in the logs and combining all the same error message, so it shows just a single time. Then somebody can fix it, and then somebody can mark it as fixed. And then if you have regression, it will pop up again. But it's not like getting all the different sources and like the operating system and aggregating all the information. It's very much focused on, okay, errors in my application. And the Elasticsearch is kind of taking a broader approach, all the things happening in your system, and then you can trace it through the system, and then you can see, okay, the server failed, or I have a high CPU, and because of the high CPU, some other stuff is failing. So it's kind of a bigger picture than just like the specific messages you get in your system. Any more questions? No? Everybody happy? Everybody wants to go for lunch? Yes? Okay, yeah. I'm here. If you have any questions, I still got some very few Elastic stickers, because yesterday I was at a meetup and they kind of robbed me of nearly all my stickers. But I still got like 10 or so, I'm not sure. So if you want to have a sticker, come to me, or if you have any other questions also, I'm happy to answer them. Thanks.